Some treasures come with a price that no amount of money can ever repay. The salt-heavy October wind rattled the windows of the sprawling Martha's Vineyard estate as Maria Santos knelt beside the warped kitchen floorboards, crowbar in hand. 3 weeks since she'd bought this place. 3 weeks since the bank had given her one final chance to avoid foreclosure on everything that mattered. The mansion had sat empty for 2 years, its previous owners vanishing overnight, leaving behind only whispered rumors and a fire sale price that seemed too good to be true. As the rotted board finally gave way, revealing a steel vault door gleaming in the darkness below, Maria's breath caught. Inside lay neat stacks of cryptocurrency hardware wallets and manila folders marked with government seals she'd only seen in movies. The digital display showed numbers that made her dizzy. $947 million in untraceable Bitcoin. But it was the surveillance photos tucked between the folders that made her blood run cold. Images of her daughter walking to school, time-stamped from yesterday. Maria had thought she was buying salvation for her family, but had she actually purchased their death sentence? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maria's hands trembled as she dropped the surveillance photos, watching them flutter back into the vault like leaves falling into a grave. The images scattered across the cryptocurrency wallets. Her daughter Sophia's face multiplied in a dozen different angles, captured walking to Vineyard Haven Elementary, buying ice cream at the harbor, playing on the beach behind their rented cottage just last week. Someone had been watching them before she'd even bought this place. The crowbar slipped from her numb fingers, clattering against the kitchen tiles. She'd thought the worst was behind them. The divorce, Marcus's gambling debts, the repo men, the eviction notices. Moving to Martha's Vineyard was supposed to be their escape, their chance to disappear into anonymity while she figured out how to rebuild their shattered lives. She'd liquidated everything. Her mother's jewelry, her 401k, even Sophia's college fund, to scrape together the down payment for this mysteriously underpriced mansion. Now, crouched on the cold floor of a kitchen that suddenly felt more like a crime scene, Maria realized she might have traded one nightmare for another. The vault door bore no visible locks, just a biometric scanner that pulsed red in the shadows. How had it opened? She hadn't touched anything except the floorboards above, unless her eyes fell on the crowbar, its metal surface now faintly warm against the October chill. Some kind of proximity sensor? Maria forced herself to breathe, to think like the forensic accountant she used to be before her world imploded. Follow the money, trace the patterns, find the truth. That's what she'd done for 15 years, unraveling corporate fraud and financial conspiracies for the FBI's white-collar crime division. Before Marcus's addiction had consumed everything, before the threats against their family had forced her to resign, before she'd discovered that sometimes the very system you served could turn against you. She pulled out her phone to call 911, then stopped. What would she tell them? That she'd found what appeared to be nearly $1 billion in cryptocurrency and classified documents beneath her kitchen floor? That someone was already surveilling her daughter? The police would ask questions she couldn't answer about money she wasn't supposed to have, in a house with a history no one wanted to discuss. The manila folders seemed to mock her from the vault's depths. Government seals, classification stamps, and in the corner of the topmost file, a presidential seal that made her stomach lurch. She'd signed enough NDAs in her FBI days to recognize the weight of what she was looking at. Wind howled through the mansion's Victorian bones, and somewhere upstairs, a door creaked open and shut with rhythmic persistence. The real estate agent had mentioned the house needed work. Foundation settling, old hinges, temperamental plumbing, normal problems for a normal house bought by normal people with normal lives. But nothing about this felt normal anymore. Maria grabbed a dish towel from the counter and carefully lifted one of the photos, studying the timestamp. Yesterday, 3:47 p.m., exactly when Sophia would have been walking home from school. The angle suggested it was taken from a vehicle parked across from the elementary school. Professional equipment, professional distance, professional patience. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sophia staying late for art club, walking to Jenny's after. Home by 7. Love you, Mom. The message had arrived at 4:23 p.m. Maria glanced at her watch, 4:47. In her FBI days, she'd learned that surveillance often preceded action. Whoever had been watching them might be done watching. She scrambled to her feet, her mind racing through protocols she hadn't used in 3 years. Secure the evidence, protect the witness. In this case, Sophia. But first, she needed to understand what she was protecting her from. The cryptocurrency wallets lay in precise rows, each one labeled with alphanumeric codes that meant nothing to her. But the government files, those might have answers. Maria reached for the presidential folder, then hesitated. Some doors, once opened, could never be closed again. The house groaned around her, and she wondered about its previous owners. The real estate agent had been evasive about their departure, mentioning only that they'd left suddenly for personal reasons. No forwarding address, no contact information, just an estate sale that had been cancelled at the last minute and a mansion that had sat empty until the bank finally listed it at a quarter of its assessed value. Had they found the vault too? Had they run because of what was inside or because of who might come looking for it? Another gust of wind, and this time Maria heard something that made her blood freeze. The distant sound of car doors slamming shut somewhere beyond the circular drive. Sophia wasn't due home for 2 hours, and the nearest neighbor was half a mile away through dense oak forest. Maria reached for the presidential folder with one hand and her phone with the other. Whatever secrets lay beneath her kitchen floor, she was about to discover that some knowledge came with a price measured, not in money, but in the safety of everyone she loved. The car doors hadn't slammed again, but Maria's pulse hammered against her ribs as she strained to listen through the old house's symphony of creaks and whistles. False alarm. Probably just the wind catching a neighbor's garage door half a mile through the trees. She forced herself to breathe and think rationally about what came next. Sophia would be home in 90 minutes, hungry for dinner and full of stories about her art project. They'd sit at the kitchen island like they did every evening, Sophia's backpack dumped carelessly by the door, homework scattered between bites of whatever Maria could cobble together from their still sparse pantry. Normal mother-daughter routines that had become Maria's anchor in the chaos of rebuilding their lives. She looked down at the vault, its contents seeming to pulse with malevolent energy in the kitchen's warm lighting. The presidential folder lay within reach, but so did her daughter's safety. Maria had learned hard lessons about the cost of curiosity during her FBI years. Some investigations consumed everything you touched. Her phone buzzed with a reminder, parent-teacher conferences tomorrow, 3:30 p.m. Mrs. Henderson wanted to discuss Sophia's adjustment challenges, code for the nightmares that had started after the divorce, and the way her daughter still flinched when strangers got too close. Moving to Martha's Vineyard was supposed to give Sophia space to heal, not expose her to new dangers. Maria crouched and began carefully replacing the floorboards, her movements automatic while her mind raced. She'd spent 3 years building their small, quiet life. Weekend trips to the harbor for ice cream, bedtime stories in Sophia's yellow-painted bedroom, Saturday morning pancakes that always turned out slightly burned. Simple pleasures that felt miraculous after the darkness of Marcus's addiction and its aftermath. The house had seemed like a gift when she'd first walked through it 6 weeks ago. 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and enough space for Sophia to spread out her art supplies without Maria worrying about security deposits or noise complaints. The price had been too good to believe. $400,000 for a property assessed at $1.6 million, but the seller's bank had been eager to close quickly. Maria hadn't asked too many questions, afraid they might change their minds. Now she wondered what questions she should have asked. The floorboards clicked back into place with satisfying precision, hiding the vault as completely as if it had never existed. But the weight of knowledge pressed against Maria's chest like a physical thing. She'd built their new life on secrets that weren't hers, in a house that harbored mysteries she couldn't begin to understand. Her laptop sat open on the kitchen counter, displaying the budget spreadsheet she'd been updating when the loose floorboard had first caught her attention. Numbers in neat columns: Sophia's school supplies, $47, groceries for the week, $83. Heating bill estimate, $120. The careful mathematics of a life lived close to the margins, where every dollar had a purpose and every purchase required consideration. The cryptocurrency wallets in the vault below represented more money than Maria could spend in 10 lifetimes. But she'd learned the hard way that money always came with strings attached. Marcus had thought his gambling was about getting rich quick. It had taken years for Maria to understand it was about the high of having a secret, the intoxication of living a double life. She closed the laptop and moved to the window, watching shadows lengthen across the circular drive. The mansion's grounds stretched toward the forest, beautiful and isolated. When she'd signed the papers, that isolation had felt like protection. Tonight it felt like vulnerability. Her phone rang, making her jump. Sophia's school number. "Mrs. Santos? This is Principal Walsh. I wanted to let you know Sophia's staying a bit later for art club. She's working on something special and didn't want to stop." "That's fine," Maria said, though relief and worry warred in her chest. Safe at school, but also delayed. "Will someone walk her to her friend's house?" "Of course." "She's such a resilient girl, Mrs. Santos. The move has been good for her." After hanging up, Maria found herself studying the kitchen with new eyes. The vintage farmhouse sink where Sophia washed her paintbrushes, the breakfast nook where they'd shared their first meal in the new house, eating take-out pizza off paper plates and giggling about the echo in the empty rooms, the spot by the refrigerator where Sophia had hung her first drawing of their new home, a crayon castle with rainbow windows and a garden full of improbable purple flowers. This was supposed to be their sanctuary, their chance to build something good from the wreckage of everything that had come before. Maria had sacrificed her career, her savings, and her trust in the future to give Sophia this opportunity for normalcy. Whatever lay in that vault, whoever had put it there, whatever danger it represented, Maria couldn't let it destroy what they'd fought so hard to build. But she also couldn't ignore the surveillance photos or pretend she hadn't seen the government seals. The house settled around her as darkness crept across the grounds, and Maria realized that her ordinary world, the one she'd worked so desperately to create, had just become extraordinary in the most dangerous way possible. The phone rang again at 8:17 p.m., just as Maria was checking the locks for the third time since Sophia had returned home, bubbling with excitement about her art project, a watercolor of the mansion that captured details Maria hadn't even noticed. The caller ID showed only numbers, no name. "Hello?" Maria answered, keeping her voice steady while watching Sophia brush her teeth upstairs through the bathroom's open door. Silence stretched across the line, filled with the faint hum of electronic equipment. Then a voice, professionally neutral. "Mrs. Santos, we need to talk." Maria's blood turned to ice. "Who is this?" "Someone who knows you found what you weren't supposed to find. We'll be there in 20 minutes. The line went dead. Maria stared at the phone, her forensic training warring with maternal panic. 20 minutes. Sophia was in her pajamas, hair still damp from her shower, completely oblivious to the danger that had just announced itself with chilling precision. "Mom?" Sophia appeared at the top of the stairs, clutching her worn stuffed elephant. "Are you okay? You look weird." "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired." The lie tasted bitter, but Maria had become expert at protecting Sophia from adult terrors. "Why don't you read in bed for a while? Can I work on my drawing instead? I want to add the garden before I forget how the light looked today." Any other night, Maria would have insisted on the bedtime routine that gave Sophia comfort and structure. Tonight she needed her daughter safely upstairs and occupied. Of course, just for a little while. Sophia beamed and disappeared back toward her room. Maria heard the familiar sounds of art supplies being arranged with 12-year-old precision, colored pencils sorted by hue, paper positioned just so, the small desk lamp clicking on. 18 minutes now. Maria moved to the kitchen window, scanning the darkened grounds. The circular drive lay empty, but shadows pooled beneath the oak trees where headlights might not immediately penetrate. Her FBI training kicked in with automatic efficiency, assess the situation, identify resources, plan for contingencies. The vault lay beneath her feet like a sleeping bomb. She could pretend ignorance, claim she'd never opened it, never seen the surveillance photos or government documents. But whoever was coming already knew better. The phone call proved they'd been monitoring more than just her movements. 15 minutes. Maria climbed the stairs, her footsteps steady despite the chaos in her chest. Sophia's door stood ajar, warm yellow light spilling into the hallway. Inside, her daughter worked with the focused intensity she brought to everything that mattered, her tongue poking out slightly as she added delicate shading to the mansion's Victorian gingerbread trim. "Sophia," Maria said carefully, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. Some people are coming to talk to Mommy about boring grown-up things. I want you to stay in your room with the door locked until I come get you, okay?" Sophia's hand paused over her drawing. "Are we in trouble, like before?" The question hit Maria like a physical blow. Sophia had been 9 when the threats started, when Marcus's gambling debts had attracted the wrong kind of attention, and their quiet suburban life had exploded into fear and chaos. She'd promised her daughter those days were over, that Martha's Vineyard would be different. "No, baby, we're not in trouble. But I need you to be my brave girl and follow our safety rules, remember?" Sophia nodded solemnly. They'd practiced this, legacy protocols from their darkest days. Lock the door, hide in the closet, don't come out until Maria used their special code word. "Should I call 911? "Not unless you hear the code word." "Can you remember what it is?" "Sunflower." Sophia's voice was small but steady. "That's right. I love you, sweetheart." "I love you too, Mommy." Maria kissed Sophia's forehead, inhaling the familiar scent of children's shampoo and paint water, then stepped into the hallway and waited until she heard the bedroom lock click into place. 10 minutes. She returned to the kitchen and stood over the spot where the vault lay hidden. Her choice crystallized with brutal clarity. She could run, grab Sophia and disappear into the night, abandoning everything they'd built here. Or she could stay and face whatever was coming, gambling that her FBI experience and maternal desperation would be enough to protect what mattered most. Running meant starting over again, possibly with dangerous people in pursuit. Staying meant confronting secrets that had already proven deadly enough to empty a mansion and leave nearly $1 billion abandoned beneath a kitchen floor. Headlights swept across the front windows, moving slowly up the circular drive. Maria's hand hovered over her phone, 911 ready to dial. But she thought of Sophia's drawing upstairs, the careful way she'd rendered their new home as a fairy tale castle, complete with rainbow windows and impossible purple flowers. This house was supposed to be their sanctuary, their chance at the normal life Sophia deserved. The headlights stopped. Car doors opened with mechanical precision. Maria Santos, former forensic accountant and current guardian of secrets she never asked for, walked toward the front door to face whatever came next. Her ordinary world was about to become extraordinary, and she could only hope they'd both survive the transformation. Maria's hand froze on the front door handle, her FBI training colliding with 3 years of carefully constructed normalcy. Through the beveled glass, she could make out 2 figures approaching, their movements measured, professional, unhurried, the kind of people who announced themselves with 20-minute warnings because they knew their targets wouldn't run. She stepped back from the door, her heart hammering against her ribs. "What am I doing?" The thought crashed through her mind with sudden, overwhelming clarity. She was a single mother who balanced grocery budgets and attended PTA meetings, not someone who faced down government operatives in the middle of the night. Her days of chasing financial criminals through labyrinthine conspiracies had ended the moment Sophia became her only priority. The doorbell rang, a single polite chime that somehow felt more ominous than pounding fists would have. Maria glanced toward the stairs, where Sophia's bedroom door remained safely locked. Her daughter trusted her to handle this, to keep their carefully rebuilt world intact, But what if she couldn't? What if her curiosity about the vault had doomed them both to repeat the nightmare they'd escaped 3 years ago? She thought of Marcus in those final months, the way paranoia had consumed him as his gambling debts mounted and dangerous people began circling their suburban home. He jumped at every car door, checked locks obsessively, started seeing threats in every stranger's glance. Maria had promised herself she'd never let fear control her life that way again. But this wasn't paranoid delusion. This was real surveillance, real government documents, real people who knew exactly what she'd found. The doorbell rang again, followed by a gentle knock. "Mrs. Santos?" A woman's voice, calm and professional. "We know you're there. We just want to talk." Maria's training whispered protocols, establish contact, assess intent, control the interaction. But her maternal instincts screamed different advice: protect Sophia, minimize exposure, trust no one who arrived uninvited in the darkness. She pressed her back against the door, feeling the weight of the house around her. 6 weeks ago, this mansion had represented hope, a chance for Sophia to have the childhood Maria's own mistakes had stolen from her. They'd spent Labor Day weekend painting Sophia's room that perfect shade of yellow, hanging curtains printed with dancing butterflies, arranging bookshelves filled with stories about girls who saved kingdoms and solved mysteries. Now Maria wondered if she'd simply traded one kind of danger for another. "We know about the vault, Mrs. Santos." The voice carried through the door with patient authority. "And we know you've seen what's inside. We're not here to hurt you or your daughter. We're here to help." Help. The word that had preceded every catastrophe in Maria's recent memory. Her FBI supervisor had offered help when she'd requested protection from Marcus's creditors. Help that came with conditions, transfers, and ultimately resignation. The family court mediator had offered help during the divorce, help that had left Sophia traumatized by custody evaluations and psychological assessments. Even Marcus had claimed he was helping when his gambling had spiraled beyond control, taking increasingly desperate risks to win back what they'd lost. Maria thought of Sophia's watercolor upstairs, the way her daughter had painted their new home with tower spires that didn't exist and garden roses that wouldn't bloom until spring. A 12-year-old's vision of what safety could look like, rendered in careful brushstrokes and impossible optimism. She couldn't let anyone destroy that vision again. But she also couldn't ignore the surveillance photos or pretend the vault beneath her kitchen floor would simply disappear if she wished hard enough. The cryptocurrency wallets alone represented the kind of money that people killed for. The government documents suggested secrets that reached far beyond financial crime into territories Maria didn't want to explore. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your daughter is safe at school. She should stay safe everywhere else too." The message made Maria's decision for her. Whatever these people wanted, whoever they represented, they'd already demonstrated they could reach Sophia anywhere. Running would only delay the confrontation, not prevent it. She unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door 6 inches, keeping the security chain engaged. 2 figures stood on her porch, a woman in her 40s wearing a navy suit that screamed federal authority, and a younger man who scanned the grounds with the practiced vigilance of professional security. "Mrs. Santos," the woman said, displaying credentials too briefly for Maria to read properly. "I'm Agent Sarah Chen with a task force that monitors certain national security assets. May we come in?" Maria studied Agent Chen's face, looking for tells she'd learned to recognize during her FBI years. The slight tension around the eyes suggested fatigue. The careful positioning just outside the door's swing radius indicated defensive training. The way her partner's attention kept drifting toward the windows suggested they weren't the only ones watching the house tonight. "Do I have a choice?" Maria asked. Agent Chen's smile held no warmth. "Everyone has choices, Mrs. Santos, but some choices have consequences that extend far beyond our personal preferences." Maria thought of Sophia's trust, of the life they'd built, of the secrets now buried beneath her kitchen floor. Then she disengaged the security chain and stepped aside. Some conversations, she realized, were inevitable. The two agents stepped into Maria's foyer with the measured confidence of people accustomed to entering spaces they weren't invited into. Agent Chen's partner, younger, broader, with the kind of stillness that suggested military training, positioned himself where he could see both the front door and the staircase leading to Sophia's room. "Thank you for your cooperation," Chen said, though her tone suggested Maria's compliance had never been in question. "I'm Agent Chen, and this is Agent Torres. We represent a joint task force that handles certain sensitive matters." Maria closed the door but didn't move toward the living room. Every instinct from her FBI days told her to control the environment, keep the interaction formal and contained. What kind of sensitive matters? The kind that end up buried beneath kitchen floors in safe houses that were supposed to remain empty. Chen's eyes swept the foyer, taking in Sophia's backpack hanging by the door, the family photos Maria had finally felt brave enough to display, the small touches that had transformed this mansion into something resembling home. "I don't know what you're talking about." The lie felt necessary even though they all knew better. Torres spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the flat precision of someone reading from a script. "Mrs. Santos, at approximately 6:47 p.m. today, thermal imaging detected unusual activity in the kitchen area of this residence. Our monitoring equipment registered patterns consistent with the opening of a concealed compartment." Maria's stomach dropped. They'd been watching that closely with that level of technical sophistication. "You've been spying on my house?" "We've been protecting a national security asset," Chen corrected. "This property was never supposed to be sold. The bank made an error, one we're here to rectify." "By taking my home?" Maria thought of Sophia's artwork hanging throughout the house, the garden they'd planned for spring, the normalcy they'd fought so hard to build. "By offering you alternatives that serve everyone's interests." Chen moved deeper into the foyer, her attention focused on Maria with uncomfortable intensity. "Tell me, what did you do with your FBI career, Mrs. Santos? Forensic accounting, wasn't it? Following money trails through complex financial crimes?" The question felt like a trap. "I resigned 3 years ago." "Yes, we know. Personal circumstances. A husband with gambling debts that attracted dangerous attention." "You chose family over career." Chen's tone suggested this choice had been noted and evaluated. "Admirable. Also relevant to our current situation." Torres shifted position, his movement drawing Maria's attention to the gun concealed beneath his jacket. Not a threat exactly, but a reminder that this conversation was taking place under specific parameters. "What do you want?" Maria asked. "Your expertise." Chen's answer came without hesitation. "The materials in that vault, they're more complex than simple cryptocurrency storage. There are financial trails that need to be traced, connections that need to be verified. Your background makes you uniquely qualified to help us understand what we're dealing with." Maria felt the walls of her ordinary life crumbling around her. "And if I refuse? Then you and your daughter will need to relocate again. This house will be reclaimed under national security provisions, and you'll receive fair market value for your investment. You can start over somewhere else, build another new life. Hope that this time no one needs to disturb your peace." The threat was delivered with bureaucratic politeness, but Maria heard its true meaning. They could take everything, the house, the stability, the future she'd promised Sophia. They could scatter her life like leaves in the wind, just as Marcus's addiction had done 3 years earlier. But they were also offering something else, a chance to use skills she'd buried, to engage with the kind of complex financial mystery that had once driven her career. The forensic accountant in her was already analyzing the implications. Nearly $1 billion in untraceable cryptocurrency didn't appear overnight. Someone had been moving money through sophisticated channels for years, possibly decades. "My daughter," Maria said carefully, "she can't be part of this, whatever this is. Your daughter will be safer if you cooperate than if you run." Torres's voice carried absolute certainty. The people who originally used this safe house, they're not government, Mrs. Santos, and they're not going to simply write off a billion-dollar loss. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. This wasn't just about government secrets or financial crimes. This was about the kind of money that toppled governments, funded wars, bought silence and death in equal measure. The vault beneath her kitchen floor wasn't just a hiding place. It was the center of something vast and dangerous, something that had tentacles reaching into corridors of power she couldn't begin to imagine. Maria thought of Sophia's locked bedroom door, of the trust in her daughter's eyes when she'd promised that this house would be different, that they were finally safe. She thought of the art supplies spread across Sophia's desk, the careful way her daughter painted their new life in impossible colors. "If I help you," Maria said, "what guarantees do I have?" Chen smiled for the first time since arriving, and it transformed her face completely. "Mrs. Santos, you're not just agreeing to help us trace financial records. You're agreeing to cross a threshold into a world most people never see. There are no guarantees in that world, only choices and the courage to live with their consequences." Maria looked around her foyer, at the home she'd fought to create, at the life she'd built from the ashes of her marriage. Then she thought of Sophia's trust, and realized that some thresholds, once approached, could only be crossed forward. "What do you need me to do?" Agent Chen's smile faded as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by the sharp focus of someone accustomed to getting what they wanted. "First, we need to see exactly what you found. Every document, every device, every piece of evidence in that vault." Maria hesitated. Once she showed them everything, her only leverage disappeared. "And then? Then you help us understand what it all means." Chen gestured toward the kitchen. "After you." As they moved through the house, Maria caught Torres scanning the family photos lining the hallway. Sophia's school picture from last year, a snapshot from their first Martha's Vineyard beach day, the carefully curated evidence of their rebuilt life. His attention lingered on an image of Sophia painting at her easel, and something cold settled in Maria's chest. The kitchen felt different now, with government agents standing where she'd made Sophia's breakfast that morning. Chen crouched beside the island, running her fingers along the floor seams with professional precision. Impressive concealment work. "How did you find it?" "Accident," Maria said, which wasn't entirely a lie. "I was measuring for new appliances." Torres pulled out a device that looked like a tablet crossed with a radar gun, sweeping it across the floor. Numbers cascaded across his screen in patterns Maria didn't recognize. "Electromagnetic signature confirms advanced encryption hardware. This isn't some amateur operation." Chen stood, brushing dust from her suit. "Open it." Maria's hands shook slightly as she input the sequence that triggered the hydraulic mechanism. The floor panel slid away with its whisper-quiet precision, revealing the vault's lead-illuminated interior. Both agents leaned forward, and Maria saw something she hadn't expected in their expressions. Surprise. "Jesus," Torres breathed. "How much is actually down there?" "Current market value for the cryptocurrency alone approaches 900 million, Chen said, her voice carefully controlled. "But that's not what makes this significant." She dropped into the vault with practiced ease, her flashlight beam dancing across the metal cases. "Help me up with that grey case, the one marked Prometheus." Maria found herself taking orders, lifting cases, and following instructions like she was back in her FBI days. The familiar rhythm felt both comforting and terrifying. Torres established some kind of secure communication link, speaking in coded phrases that meant nothing to Maria, but clearly carried weight on the other end of the line. The documents Chen spread across Maria's kitchen counter made her former forensic investigations look like children's games. Bank routing numbers for institutions she'd never heard of. Transaction records stretching back 15 years. Names that made her stomach clench with recognition. Senators, foreign ministers, CEOs whose faces appeared regularly on financial news programs. "This is what we need you to decode," Chen said, pointing to a series of financial flowcharts that looked like subway maps designed by someone having a breakdown. These money trails, they represent more than just wealth transfer. They're the infrastructure for something much larger. Maria studied the documents with growing unease. Her forensic training recognized the patterns, even as her mind recoiled from their implications. This isn't just money laundering. This is systematic infiltration. Someone's been buying influence across multiple governments for over a decade. Very good. Chen's approval felt like poison, and that someone maintained this safe house as their primary operational base until 6 weeks ago when something spooked them badly enough to abandon nearly $1 billion in assets. Torres looked up from his communication device. Timelines moved up. We're getting reports of unusual activity at 3 other sites. They know we're here. Chen's expression hardened. Mrs. Santos, I need you to understand something. The people who built this operation, they don't just threaten families like yours, they eliminate obstacles permanently. A sound from upstairs made all 3 of them freeze. Footsteps in the hallway above, soft but unmistakable. Maria's heart stopped. Sophia nosed to stay in her room. Torres already had his weapon drawn, moving toward the staircase with deadly quiet. Chen grabbed Maria's arm with surprising strength. If your daughter comes down here, if she sees any of this, she becomes a permanent security risk. Do you understand what that means? The implications crashed over Maria like ice water. She'd brought her daughter into something that killed people for knowing too much, and now Sophia was wandering around upstairs, while government agents debated threat assessments in her kitchen. "Sophia!" Maria called out, trying to keep panic from her voice. "Honey, remember what Mommy said about staying in your room?" The footsteps stopped. "Mommy?" I heard voices. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, baby. Go back to bed. Use our safety rules." Long silence, then the sound of a door closing. The bedroom lock clicked audibly. Chen released Maria's arm. Smart girl. That may have just saved her life. Torres holstered his weapon, but remained positioned between the kitchen and the stairs. "We need to move this operation somewhere more secure." Agreed. Chen began gathering documents back into their cases. "Mrs. Santos, you and your daughter are coming with us. Tonight." "What?" Maria's voice cracked. "You can't just—" "We can, and we are." Chen's tone brooked no argument. "You're both now material witnesses to a national security investigation. That means protective custody until we determine the full scope of what we're dealing with." Maria looked around her kitchen, at Sophia's drawings held to the refrigerator with alphabet magnets, at the coffee maker they'd bought together last month, at all the small pieces of the life she'd fought to build. "Pack light," Chen added. "We leave in 20 minutes. Maria stared at the scattered documents on her kitchen counter, each page representing another nail in the coffin of their carefully reconstructed life. 20 minutes. The arbitrary deadline echoed in her mind as she watched Chen and Torres move through her home with practiced efficiency, treating her sanctuary like a crime scene to be processed and abandoned. "I need to explain this to Sophia," Maria said, her voice steadier than she felt. "She's been through enough upheaval. I won't traumatize her with another midnight evacuation." Chen looked up from sealing the Prometheus case. "Mrs. Santos, your daughter's trauma is irrelevant compared to her survival. The longer we remain here, the greater the risk becomes." The casual dismissal of Sophia's well-being ignited something fierce in Maria's chest. "My daughter's trauma is never irrelevant. Not to me, not to anyone who wants my cooperation." Torres paused in his systematic sweep of the kitchen, his attention shifting between the 2 women. Maria recognized the calculation in his eyes, the moment when government agents decided whether a civilian was an asset or an obstacle. 5 additional minutes, Chen conceded. "But we maintain operational security. No details about tonight's discovery, no promises about when you'll return. Tell her it's a short business trip." Maria climbed the stairs with leaden feet, each step taking her further from the illusion of normal life she'd cultivated for Sophia's sake. The hallway felt longer than usual, lined with watercolor paintings her daughter had created to make this mansion feel like home. Impossible flowers in magical colors, fantastical creatures that looked nothing like the very real monsters now gathering in their kitchen. Sophia's door was locked, as trained. Maria knocked gently. "Baby, it's Mummy. Can I come in?" The lock disengaged after a moment, and Sophia appeared in pajamas covered with paint splatters, evidence of her evening art session. Her dark eyes, so much like Marcus's but thankfully untainted by his weaknesses, searched Maria's face with 12-year-old perceptiveness. "Who are those people downstairs?" Sophia asked. "Their voices sound like the police officers who came to our old house." Maria's heart clenched. Sophia had learned to recognize authority figures during the worst period of Marcus's gambling addiction, when creditors had grown tired of phone calls and moved to more direct collection methods. Her daughter shouldn't possess that particular survival skill. "They're colleagues from my old job." The lie tasted bitter. "We need to take a short trip tonight. Just a few days, maybe a week. Pack your art supplies and some clothes." Sophia's expression cycled through emotions too complex for her age: disappointment, fear, resignation, and finally a heartbreaking attempt at mature understanding. "Is it like before? When Daddy's friends came looking for him?" "No, baby. This is different." Maria knelt to Sophia's eye level, taking her daughter's paint-stained hands in hers. "This time, we're helping them solve something important. And when it's finished, we come home. To our home. This house, your room, your paintings on the walls. Promise?" The single word carried the weight of every broken commitment from their past, every time adults had failed to protect the stability Sophia craved. Maria thought of the documents downstairs, of Chen's warnings about permanent security risks, of the surveillance photographs showing men who killed for far less than Sophia now unknowingly possessed. The promise felt like placing her daughter's trust on an altar to forces beyond their control, but Sophia needed hope more than she needed absolute truth. "I promise we'll fight to come home," Maria said carefully, "and I promise that whatever happens, we face it together." Sophia nodded with the solemn gravity of someone far older, then moved to her easel where a half-finished painting waited. The image showed their house again, but this time storm clouds gathered overhead while small figures, Maria recognized herself and Sophia, stood in the garden holding hands. "I dreamed about rain last night," Sophia said quietly, adding darker blues to the sky with methodical brushstrokes. "But in the dream we stayed dry because we had each other." Maria watched her daughter paint their uncertain future with matter-of-fact acceptance, and something fundamental shifted in her understanding of what tonight meant. This wasn't just about cryptocurrency or conspiracy or survival. This was about whether the life they'd built together was strong enough to survive the storm approaching their small sanctuary. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Torres stood in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. "Time's up. Vehicles waiting." Sophia capped her paints with practiced efficiency, as if midnight departures were simply another part of childhood routine. She packed her art supplies first, then clothes, then the small stuffed rabbit that had survived every previous upheaval. Maria helped her daughter gather the pieces of their portable life, both of them moving with the choreographed precision of people who'd learned that home was what you could carry, not what you could build. As they descended the stairs together, Maria caught Sophia studying the government agents with curious intelligence rather than fear. Her daughter had inherited more than Marcus's eyes. She'd also inherited Maria's analytical mind and her own hard-earned resilience. Whatever waited beyond their front door, they would face it as they always had, together, prepared for anything except surrender. Chen held the door open, her expression unreadable in the porch light. "Ready?" Maria squeezed Sophia's hand. "We're ready." The black SUV waiting in their driveway looked exactly like the vehicles that had haunted Maria's nightmares during Marcus's worst spiral. Government plates, tinted windows, the kind of official presence that transformed neighborhoods into crime scenes. Sophia's grip tightened on Maria's hand as they approached, her daughter's resilience finally showing cracks. "Where are we going?" Sophia whispered, her voice smaller than it had been upstairs. Chen opened the rear door without answering. The interior smelled of leather and something medicinal, like the antibacterial wipes used in hospitals. Torres slid into the driver's seat while Chen claimed the passenger position, leaving Maria and Sofia isolated in the back like prisoners being transported. As they pulled away from the house, Maria watched their home disappear into darkness through the rear window. Every light they'd forgotten to turn off felt like a beacon marking what they were leaving behind. The kitchen light still glowed over the counter where she'd made Sofia's breakfast 8 hours ago, back when their biggest worry had been whether the new school's art program would challenge her daughter enough. "Phone," Chen said, extending her hand toward Maria without turning around. "Excuse me?" "Your phone. Your daughter's device, if she has one. They need to be secured." Maria's stomach dropped. "I need to be able to contact—" "You'll contact no one until this situation is resolved." Chen's tone suggested this wasn't negotiable. "The people we're dealing with have resources that would surprise you. Phone signals can be traced, intercepted, used to track movement patterns. Your family's safety depends on complete communication blackout." Sofia pulled her tablet from her backpack with obvious reluctance. The device contained all her digital art, photos from their Martha's Vineyard adventures, the carefully curated evidence of their rebuilt life. Watching Chen slip it into a metallic bag that immediately blocked all signals felt like another small death. The SUV turned onto the main road, and Maria realized she had no idea where they were being taken. The federal agents had spoken of protective custody, but offered no details about duration, location, or conditions. She was a forensic accountant, trained to demand documentation and verify claims, but found herself completely powerless in the face of national security protocols. "Mommy," Sofia whispered, leaning against Maria's shoulder, "the quiet feels different than our normal quiet." Her daughter was right. The silence in the vehicle carried weight, the oppressive atmosphere of secrets and unspoken threats. Maria had spent 3 years teaching Sofia to read situations for safety, to recognize when adults were lying or hiding dangerous truths. Now, those same survival instincts were triggering every warning system they'd developed. Torres spoke into a hands-free communication system, his words coded, but his tone urgent. "Package secured. En route to secondary location. Request status update on perimeter security." The response crackled through hidden speakers. 3 additional sites compromised in the last hour. Pattern suggests coordinated intelligence gathering. Recommend immediate escalation to Protocol 7. Maria's forensic training caught the implications even as her maternal instincts screamed warnings. 3 sites compromised meant whatever conspiracy they'd stumbled into was actively responding to tonight's discovery. Someone was moving pieces on a board she couldn't see, making decisions about threats and assets and acceptable losses. Sofia was an asset now, or a liability depending on perspective. "Agent Chen," Maria said carefully, "when you say protective custody, what exactly does that mean for my daughter's schooling, her routine, her—" "Your daughter's routine is now survival." Chen finally turned around, and in the dashboard light, her expression was harder than Maria had seen it. "Mrs. Santos, I need you to understand what you've walked into. The vault beneath your kitchen floor. It wasn't just a safe house for money laundering or even influence peddling. It was the operational center for a network that has been systematically compromising government officials, foreign dignitaries, and corporate leaders for over 15 years. The SUV turned onto a highway, headlights streaming past like tracer rounds in the darkness. Sofia had gone very still against Maria's shoulder, and Maria knew her daughter was listening to every word, despite pretending to sleep. "The cryptocurrency you found represents payment for services that would horrify you," Chen continued. "Assassinations, government coups, corporate sabotage, terrorist attacks designed to destabilize entire regions. And the people who built that network? They've just learned that their primary operational base has been discovered by a single mother and her 12-year-old daughter." Maria felt the last of her illusions crumble. This wasn't about helping government investigators trace financial records. This was about becoming the focal point of a shadow war she'd never asked to join. "They're going to come for us," Sophia said quietly, no longer pretending to sleep. "Aren't they, Mummy?" Maria looked at her daughter, brilliant, perceptive Sophia, who painted impossible flowers and dreamed of storm clouds, but always survived by facing truth directly. The greatest fear of every parent, that the world would prove more dangerous than her ability to protect the person she loved most. "Yes, baby," Maria whispered. "They're going to try." The SUV's headlights cut through pre-dawn darkness as Torres took an exit Maria didn't recognize. They'd been driving for 2 hours, and Sophia had finally fallen into genuine sleep against her shoulder, exhausted by fear and uncertainty. Maria envied her daughter's ability to find peace even in crisis, a skill learned too young during Marcus's worst years. "Safe house is 3 miles ahead," Torres reported into his communication device. No signs of pursuit. Chen's response was immediate. "That's about to change." Before Maria could ask what she meant, Chen's phone erupted with an incoming call. She answered on the first ring, her expression growing more grim with each passing second. "When?" Chen asked sharply. "How many casualties?" Maria's blood turned to ice. The word casualties hung in the air like poison gas. "Understood. Maintain radio silence until secondary sweep is complete." Chen ended the call and turned to face Maria, her professional mask slipping just enough to reveal genuine concern. "Mrs. Santos, I need you to listen very carefully. 3 hours ago, a team of unidentified operatives raided the federal facility where we were supposed to take you." The world tilted sideways. "What does that mean?" "It means someone knew our protocols before we implemented them. They knew exactly where protective custody would place you and your daughter, and they moved to intercept." Chen's voice carried the weight of a plan disintegrating in real time. 4 federal agents were killed. The facility is compromised. Sophia stirred against Maria's shoulder, some unconscious part of her responding to the tension filling the vehicle. Maria stroked her daughter's hair, trying to maintain calm while her mind raced through implications that grew more terrifying with each passing second. "Then where are we going now?" Maria whispered. Torres and Chen exchanged glances that communicated volumes. Finally, Chen spoke. "We don't know. Every safe house in our network has to be considered compromised. Every protocol has been anticipated. Whoever built that operation beneath your kitchen floor, they've been preparing for this scenario for years." The SUV slowed as Torres pulled into an empty rest stop, parking under broken streetlights that cast everything in sickly yellow shadows. In the distance, an 18-wheeler idled like a sleeping giant, its driver invisible behind tinted glass. "This wasn't supposed to happen," Torres said, and Maria heard something she hadn't expected in his voice: fear. "Our intelligence suggested the network had been dormant for weeks, radio silent, but they responded to tonight's discovery faster than we thought possible." Chen checked her weapon with practiced efficiency. "Which means they never left. They've been watching, waiting to see who would find their treasure and how the government would respond." The full scope of their trap became clear to Maria with horrifying clarity. "We weren't discovering evidence. We were triggering an alarm." "Exactly." Chen's admission felt like a confession. "And now they know everything. Your name, your daughter's school, your ex-husband's location, your sister's address in California. Every connection in your life has become a potential target." Sophia's eyes opened, immediately alert despite having been asleep moments before. "Mummy, why did we stop?" Before Maria could answer, Torres's communication device crackled with an emergency transmission. "All units, be advised. Target's ex-husband found dead in Boston apartment. Single gunshot wound. Scene staged to look like suicide related to gambling debts." The words hit Maria like physical blows. Marcus, weak, flawed Marcus who had destroyed their marriage but never stopped loving Sophia, was dead. Killed because his connection to them had made him a liability in someone else's game. No, Maria breathed, her world collapsing around the edges. No, he wouldn't. Marcus would never. Mommy? Sophia sat up straighter, reading her mother's expression with 12-year-old intuition that missed nothing important. What happened to Daddy? Maria looked into her daughter's eyes and saw the exact moment when childhood ended forever. Not because of divorce or financial struggle or midnight evacuations, but because the world had just taught Sophia that people who loved her could be murdered to send messages. "He's gone, baby," Maria whispered. "Daddy's gone." Sophia didn't cry. Instead, she went very still, the same deadly calm Maria had seen her develop during Marcus's gambling spiral. Her daughter was learning to survive by turning emotions off, and Maria recognized the coping mechanism because she'd mastered it herself years ago. Chen's phone rang again. She answered with growing dread. What now? The conversation lasted 30 seconds, but Maria watched Chen's face transform from concern to something approaching panic. When the call ended, the federal agent stared at her hands for a long moment before speaking. "Your sister's house in California was firebombed an hour ago. Carmen and her family escaped, but barely." "And Mrs. Santos?" Chen's voice cracked slightly. "They left a message painted on your daughter's bedroom wall at your old house in Boston. 2 words, 'We're coming.'" Maria felt the last of her strength drain away. Everyone she'd ever loved was now a target. Her ex-husband was dead, her sister's family terrorized, and somewhere in the darkness, people with unlimited resources were hunting her 12-year-old daughter, all for cryptocurrency she'd never wanted and secrets she'd never asked to uncover. They'd lost before the war had even begun. The silence stretched until Sophia spoke, her voice carrying an eerie calm that chilled Maria more than tears would have. "They're not coming for us," Sophia said, still staring out the window at the empty rest stop. "They're already here." Maria followed her daughter's gaze and saw what Sophia's artist's eye had caught first. The 18-wheeler that had been idling in the distance was now gone, replaced by 2 sedans with their headlights off. In the darkness between streetlights, shadows moved with purpose that had nothing to do with late-night travelers. "Torres, we need to move," Chen said sharply, but her partner was already reaching for his weapon. "Too late," Torres whispered. 3 vehicles, coordinated approach, professional formation. Maria's forensic mind suddenly kicked into overdrive, cutting through grief and terror with analytical precision. "Wait," she said, something crystallizing in her thoughts. "Chen, when did you say the federal facility was raided?" 3 hours ago. "Why?" "And when did you get the call about Marcus?" Chen checked her phone. 40 minutes ago." Maria's breathing quickened as pieces fell into place. "The timing is wrong, all of it. A coordinated international operation doesn't move this fast unless—" She stopped, ice forming in her stomach as the impossible truth emerged. "Unless they knew we'd found the vault before we even called it in." Sophia turned from the window to study the adults with sudden intensity. "Mommy's right. In my art class, Mrs. Patterson taught us about composition, how you have to plan the whole painting before you start. You can't just react to each brushstroke." "Sophia—" "No, let her finish," Chen said urgently. Sophia's voice remained unnaturally steady. "Bad people don't paint reactions, they paint plans, which means someone told them we found the secret room." Maria felt the world shift beneath her as the revelation hit with devastating clarity. "It was never about protective custody, was it, Chen? You knew exactly what was in that vault before we opened it." Chen's silence lasted 3 seconds too long, a confession in itself. "The whole investigation was theater," Maria continued, pieces clicking together with forensic precision. "You've been watching our house for weeks, waiting for us to find it, waiting for us to trigger something." Torres slowly turned around, and Maria saw her death in his eyes. "She's figured it out." "Figured what out?" Sophia asked, though her grip on Maria's hand suggested she already knew the answer would be terrible. Chen's mask finally fell completely away, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. "Your mother is very smart, Sophia, too smart. She's realized that sometimes the people who claim to be protecting you are actually the ones you need protection from. The truth hit Maria like a physical blow. You're part of it. The network, the conspiracy. You're not investigating, you're managing cleanup. The vault was supposed to remain hidden for another 6 months, Chen said conversationally, as if discussing weather rather than betrayal. Long enough for certain international arrangements to be finalized. But then a persistent single mother bought the wrong house and raised the wrong daughter. Sophia's artistic intuition had been right all along. She'd painted storms over their house because some part of her had sensed the approaching darkness. Maria thought of her daughter's recent nightmares, the subtle changes in behavior, the way Sophia had started drawing escape routes in her sketches of their home. The cryptocurrency was bait, Maria whispered. All of it. You wanted us to find just enough to feel important, to trust you completely. Nearly $1 billion makes for very convincing bait, Torres agreed. Most people become so focused on the money they miss the larger picture. But not most people, Maria said, her forensic training finally overriding her terror. I'm trained to follow money trails, to spot inconsistencies, to question sources. You picked the wrong mark. Chen smiled without warmth. Actually, Mrs. Santos, we picked perfectly. Your background makes you the ideal scapegoat. Former forensic accountant discovers terrorist funding network, gets in over her head, makes desperate choices to protect her daughter. Very believable narrative for the news cycle. Sophia had gone preternaturally still again, but Maria could feel her daughter's mind working. 12 years old, but already understanding that adults could be monsters wearing helpful masks. Mommy, Sophia said quietly, remember what you taught me about bullies? How they're only dangerous if you believe their stories about themselves? Maria met her daughter's eyes and saw not fear, but calculation. Sophia was right. They'd been believing Chen's story about federal protection, about national security, about their own helplessness. What are you thinking, baby? Sophia's answer came with the matter-of-fact tone she used when explaining her paintings. I'm thinking they need us alive, or they wouldn't be talking so much. And I'm thinking you're still the smartest person in any room, even when the room is full of bad people. The revelation wasn't just about the conspiracy's true nature. It was about remembering who they really were, not victims, not helpless civilians caught in forces beyond their control, survivors who had already overcome impossible odds once before. Maria felt something shift inside her chest, not fear draining away, but transforming into something sharper and more useful. Sophia was right. They weren't helpless. They'd survived Marcus's gambling addiction, financial ruin, and complete social upheaval through careful planning and refusing to accept other people's narratives about their worth. You're going to kill us anyway, Maria said, her voice steadying as her forensic mind engaged fully. But you need it to look right. Tragic murder-suicide, maybe? Desperate mother realizes she's in too deep, can't protect her daughter from the consequences of her greed. Chen's slight smile confirmed the accuracy of Maria's assessment. The story writes itself. Very clean. Except for one problem, Maria continued, sliding her hand slowly toward the door handle. You still need to stage the scene properly, which means you need us somewhere else, somewhere that fits your narrative. This rest stop doesn't work. Too public, too many security cameras. Torres glanced toward the sedans that had been positioning themselves around the parking lot. She's stalling. Let her talk, Chen said. I'm curious where the brilliant forensic accountant thinks this is heading. Maria felt Sophia's hand squeeze hers. 3 short pulses, 2 long ones. The Morse code for ready that they'd practiced during their worst days with Marcus, when they'd needed silent ways to communicate their escape plans. Here's what I think, Maria said, her voice growing stronger. I think you've been cleaning up loose ends for months. Marcus wasn't killed because he knew about the vault. He was killed because someone needed to establish a pattern of escalating stakes. My sister's house wasn't bombed as a warning. It was bombed to drive us into your arms. Sophia shifted slightly, her artist's hands moving with practiced stealth to unlock her door. And I think, Maria continued, that you made the same mistake every overconfident operation makes. You assumed we were ordinary people who would react in ordinary ways. Enlighten us, Chen said dryly. Maria's smile felt dangerous even to herself. You forgot that I spent 3 years learning to outthink a gambling addict with a photographic memory and connections to some very unpleasant people. Marcus taught me something valuable before he destroyed our marriage, how to think like someone who's always 3 moves ahead. Torres was reaching for his weapon when Sophia suddenly spoke up with perfect 12-year-old curiosity. Agent Chen, can I ask you something? When you were little, did you ever play the game where you had to be really, really quiet? The question was so innocent, so perfectly delivered, that Chen actually leaned forward slightly. What game, Sophia? This one, Sophia whispered, and simultaneously she and Maria threw themselves out opposite sides of the SUV. Maria hit the asphalt rolling muscle memory from Marcus's paranoid escape drills taking over. Behind her, she heard Torres shouting orders and Chen cursing, but they'd gained precious seconds of confusion. Sophia appeared at Maria's side, moving with the fluid grace she brought to everything: art, observation, survival. The storm drain, she breathed, pointing toward a concrete culvert barely visible in the broken streetlight. They ran. Behind them, car doors slammed and flashlight beams sliced through the darkness. But Maria and Sophia had spent years perfecting the art of moving quietly through shadows. Marcus's gambling debts had taught them to slip away from dangerous people, to navigate by darkness, to become invisible when visibility meant death. The storm drain was narrow but passable, leading away from the rest stop toward what looked like abandoned industrial buildings. Maria pulled out her phone to call for help, then remembered Chen's metallic evidence bag. All their devices were compromised, tracked, useless. "Mommy," Sophia whispered as they crouched in the concrete tunnel, listening to shouts growing more distant. "I know where we need to go." "Where, baby?" "Remember Mrs. Patterson from my art class? The one who always said I was too serious in my paintings?" Maria nodded, not understanding the relevance but trusting Sophia's instincts completely. She used to be an investigative journalist before she became a teacher. She told me once that if I ever needed help understanding something dangerous that adults were hiding, I should come find her. Sophia's voice carried absolute certainty. She lives 20 minutes from here, and she knows how to make bad people's secrets into newspaper stories. For the first time in hours, Maria felt something approaching hope. An ally, someone outside the compromised federal system, someone with the skills to expose what they'd discovered. "How do you know she lives near here?" Sophia's smile was visible even in the darkness. "Because last month she invited our whole art class to visit her house for a painting workshop. I remember the address because I always remember addresses. They had a destination, they had their freedom, and most importantly, they had each other. The game was far from over." The storm drain led them through half a mile of darkness before emerging behind a cluster of abandoned warehouses. Maria's knees were scraped raw from crawling, but Sophia moved ahead with the silent determination of someone who had learned too young that survival sometimes meant ignoring pain. "This way," Sophia whispered, pointing toward a chain-link fence that bordered what looked like a residential neighborhood. "Mrs. Patterson's house has blue shutters and a garden full of sculptures she made from recycled metal." They climbed the fence carefully, Sophia's artist hands finding purchase points that Maria would have missed. On the other side, suburban streets stretched before them, normal houses with normal problems, a world away from cryptocurrency conspiracies and federal betrayal. As they walked, keeping to shadows between streetlights, Maria felt the full weight of what they were attempting settle over her. "Sophia, baby, we need to talk about what happens next." "I know." Sophia's voice carried a maturity that broke Maria's heart. "We can't just run away forever. They'll keep killing people we love until we give them what they want." Maria stopped walking. Her 12-year-old daughter had just articulated the strategic reality that Maria herself was still struggling to accept. "What do you think they want?" "Not the money," Sophia said immediately. "If they just wanted the cryptocurrency, they would have taken it and disappeared. They want us quiet, forever quiet. The truth was as simple as it was terrifying. Maria and Sophia had seen too much, knew too much, represented too great a risk to whatever larger operation had been running beneath their kitchen floor. The vault hadn't been abandoned, it had been temporarily relocated, and their discovery had disrupted carefully laid plans. "So we can't give them what they want," Maria said, her forensic training crystallizing around a new kind of analysis. "Which means we have to change what they need." Sophia nodded as if this logic was perfectly obvious. "We make it so hiding the truth costs more than revealing it." They resumed walking, but Maria's mind was racing ahead to implications and strategies. Mrs. Patterson represented more than just shelter. She represented the possibility of going public, of forcing the conspiracy into daylight where it would be vulnerable to scrutiny. "Something else," Sophia said quietly as they turned onto a street lined with modest two-story homes. "I've been thinking about the paintings I made of our house, the storms I kept drawing over the roof. What about them? I never consciously decided to paint storms. They just appeared. Like my hands knew something my brain didn't." Sophia's voice grew more thoughtful. "Mrs. Patterson taught us that artists sometimes see patterns before they understand them. She said our subconscious notices things our logical mind misses." Maria felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. "How long were you painting storms over our house?" "Since we moved in. Since the very first week." Which meant the surveillance, the watching, the careful manipulation. It had all been happening from the moment they'd signed the papers. Whoever was running this operation hadn't just anticipated their discovery of the vault, they'd orchestrated it. "They wanted us to find it," Maria breathed, pieces clicking together with horrible clarity. "The previous owners didn't abandon the house mysteriously. They were moved out specifically so we could move in. A forensic accountant and her observant daughter, perfect patsies to discover evidence at exactly the right moment." Sophia stopped walking and turned to face her mother. "Mommy, if they planned for us to find the vault, and they planned for us to call the FBI, and they planned for Agent Chen to respond." She paused, working through the logical chain. What else did they plan for? The question hung in the air like a physical presence. If their escape from the rest stop had been anticipated, if Mrs. Patterson's involvement was somehow expected, if even their decision to go public was part of some larger strategy. "We need to assume they're 3 moves ahead," Maria said, her voice growing harder with resolve. "Which means we need to be 4 moves ahead." They'd reached a house with blue shutters and a front yard full of abstract metal sculptures that caught moonlight like trapped lightning. Mrs. Patterson's home looked exactly as Sophia had described, the sanctuary of someone who saw beauty in discarded things and possibility in broken pieces. Maria felt something solidify in her chest as they approached the front door. Not hope exactly, but commitment. They'd been running since the moment they'd opened that vault, reactive and defensive. But running had only gotten them betrayed by the people who claimed to be protecting them. It was time to stop running and start hunting. "Sophia," Maria said as they climbed the porch steps, "whatever happens next, whatever we learn or discover or have to do, we finish this. Together. No matter what it costs." Sophia's hand found the doorbell, but she paused to meet her mother's eyes. "Promise me something? Anything. Promise me we make them sorry they ever heard our names." Maria smiled with genuine warmth for the first time in hours. Her daughter had inherited more than artistic talent. She'd inherited the Santos family's stubborn refusal to stay down when knocked over. The final confrontation was coming, and this time they'd be ready for it. Sophia pressed the doorbell, and they waited in the shadows of the metal sculptures, every second stretching like hours. Maria found herself cataloguing escape routes, the narrow alley between houses, the tall fence they could climb, the storm drain system they now knew connected to this neighborhood. Old habits from the Marcus years, when planning exits had meant survival. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 60s, with paint-stained fingers and kind eyes that sharpened immediately upon seeing Sophia's face. "Sophia Santos," Mrs. Patterson said. her voice carrying both surprise and instant concern. "What are you doing here at—" She checked her watch. "Nearly midnight, sweetheart. We need help," Sophia said simply. "The kind of help you used to give people before you became a teacher." Mrs. Patterson's gaze shifted to Maria, taking in her scraped knees, torn clothes, and the barely controlled desperation in her eyes. Without another word, she stepped aside and gestured them into her living room. The interior looked like an artist's sanctuary crossed with a journalist's war room. Half-finished sculptures occupied every corner, but the walls were covered with framed newspaper clippings, awards for investigative reporting, and photographs of Mrs. Patterson standing next to people Maria vaguely recognized as whistleblowers and activists. "Sophia mentioned you once worked in journalism," Maria began, but Mrs. Patterson raised a hand to stop her. "Before we talk, we secure communications." Mrs. Patterson moved to an old wooden desk and pulled out what looked like a modified radio. 30 years of investigating government corruption teaches you that walls have ears and phones have trackers. This is a ham radio setup my source contacts taught me to use. She flipped several switches, and static filled the room before resolving into a clear channel. "We're encrypted now. Local law enforcement, federal agencies, corporate surveillance, none of it can penetrate this frequency without specialized equipment they'd need a warrant to deploy." Maria felt something loosen in her chest. Finally, someone who understood the depth of what they were facing. "Now," Mrs. Patterson said, settling into a chair across from them, "tell me everything. And Sophia, sweetheart, when your mother finishes, I want you to tell me what you observed that she might have missed. Artists see things differently than accountants." Maria began with the vault discovery, but Mrs. Patterson interrupted almost immediately. "Wait, the Martha's Vineyard estate you purchased, was it the Blackwood property on Seaview Drive? You know it?" Mrs. Patterson's expression grew grave. "I've been investigating that property for 3 years. It's changed hands 17 times in the past decade, always under suspicious circumstances. Previous owners either disappeared, died in accidents, or suddenly relocated overseas with no forwarding addresses." Sophia leaned forward. "You mean we weren't the first people to find the vault? You weren't even the 10th. Mrs. Patterson pulled out a thick folder from her desk drawer. "Every family who's lived there has stumbled across various hidden compartments, secret rooms, or encrypted storage devices, and every family has subsequently vanished from the public record." Maria felt her world shift again. They hadn't been carefully selected marks. They'd been the latest victims in a repeating pattern of discovery and elimination. "But here's what makes your case different," Mrs. Patterson continued, spreading photographs and documents across her coffee table. "You're the first people to escape the initial contact phase. Everyone else was either killed immediately upon discovery or disappeared during their first meeting with federal agents." Sophia studied the photographs with her artist's intensity. "These families, they all had children my age." "Exactly. The pattern suggests someone was looking for a specific type of discovery team. Adults with investigative backgrounds paired with observant children. Previous attempts included a retired detective with his granddaughter, an insurance investigator with her son, a tax attorney with his twins." Maria's forensic mind began processing the implications. They've been testing approaches, refining their method, learning from each failed attempt. "Which means," Mrs. Patterson said grimly, "whatever operation they're protecting is significant enough to justify years of careful experimentation and multiple casualties." Sophia had gone quiet, but Maria recognized her daughter's deep-thinking posture. When she finally spoke, her words carried the weight of revelation. "Mrs. Patterson, you said previous families found different hidden things. Not all the same vault we found." "Correct. Different compartments, different contents. Always valuable enough to justify calling authorities, never identical to previous discoveries." Sophia's eyes met Maria's. They've been rotating the bait, testing which types of discoveries work best for different personality profiles. The full scope of their situation crystallized with terrifying clarity. They weren't dealing with a single conspiracy or cover-up. They were dealing with an active, evolving research operation that had been using their house as a testing ground for years. "Mrs. Patterson," Maria said, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "how do we destroy something that's had years to prepare for every move we might make?" Mrs. Patterson smiled with the dangerous expression of someone who had spent decades bringing down powerful people who believed themselves untouchable. "We stop playing their game, and we start playing ours." The ham radio crackled as Mrs. Patterson adjusted the frequency, but before she could speak, Sophia suddenly grabbed Maria's arm. "They're here," she whispered, pointing toward the front window where shadows moved across the metal sculptures outside. Mrs. Patterson didn't hesitate. She swept the documents from her coffee table into a fire-safe box, then gestured toward what looked like a bookshelf. "Emergency exit. Push the third panel from the left." But Maria wasn't moving toward the hidden door. Instead, she was staring out the window at the figures surrounding the house, her forensic mind calculating angles and numbers and timing. "No more running, Maria," Mrs. Patterson started. "They've had months to plan for our escape routes. They've had years to refine their contingencies. They want us to run again because running keeps us reactive." Maria's voice carried a cold certainty that surprised even herself. But they made one miscalculation. Sophia understood immediately. They don't know about Mrs. Patterson's investigation. Exactly. They know we'd seek help, but they don't know we'd find someone who's been hunting them for 3 years. The front door handle turned slowly, professionally. These weren't local law enforcement or even federal agents. They moved with the methodical precision of people who specialized in making problems disappear permanently. Mrs. Patterson pulled a digital recorder from her desk drawer. "Whatever happens next, it's being documented and transmitted to my source network automatically. They can't bury this anymore." The door opened, and Agent Chen stepped inside, no longer bothering with his professional facade. Behind him came Torres and 3 other figures in tactical gear. The man leading them was older, with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to absolute authority. "Mrs. Patterson," the silver-haired man said with polite menace, "your reputation as a journalist is impressive. Unfortunately, some stories are too dangerous to tell." "Director Morrison," Mrs. Patterson replied, recognition sharp in her voice. "I've been hoping to meet you for quite some time. Your operation has been sloppy. Too many dead families, too many convenient accidents." Maria felt something click into place. This wasn't just about their vault discovery. Mrs. Patterson's investigation had been closing in on Morrison's operation independently. Their arrival tonight had forced a confrontation he wasn't ready for. "The recording device," Morrison said to Torres, who moved toward Mrs. Patterson's desk. That's when Sophia spoke up with perfect 12-year-old innocence. "Are you going to kill us like you killed the other families?" Morrison's composure slipped slightly. "Child, you don't understand the complexities." "I understand that you've been using our house to test how different kinds of people react to finding secrets," Sophia interrupted, her artist's perception cutting through his manipulation. "You've been studying us like lab rats." "Sophia," Chen warned. "And I understand that you're afraid." Sophia's voice grew stronger, more confident. "You're afraid because Mommy isn't like the other people you tested. She's smarter than them." Maria stepped forward, placing herself between Sophia and Morrison. "My daughter's right. I am smarter than your previous test subjects. Smart enough to realize that this entire operation exists because someone very powerful needs certain information to stay buried." Morrison's eyes narrowed. "You have no idea what you're interfering with. Government-sanctioned money laundering through cryptocurrency wallets, foreign intelligence payments disguised as abandoned assets, political blackmail material stored in domestic safehouses." Maria's forensic training took over, laying out the conspiracy with devastating clarity. The vault wasn't abandoned. It was rotated. You move the contents regularly, but you needed to test security protocols using expendable civilians. "Impressive analysis," Morrison said coldly, "but incomplete. Then enlighten me." Morrison smiled with genuine malice. The families weren't test subjects, Mrs. Santos. They were recruitment opportunities. We've been looking for the right combination of skills and motivation to handle our more delicate operations. The previous families failed the evaluation process. The full horror crystallized. This wasn't about covering up a conspiracy. It was about finding people desperate enough and capable enough to become active participants in it. You want us to work for you, Maria breathed. Your forensic skills, your daughter's observational abilities, your shared experience with staying hidden. You represent exactly the kind of asset our organization values. Sophia's hand slipped into Maria's, squeezing once, a signal they'd developed during the Marcus years. Trust me, what happens if we refuse? Maria asked, buying time. Morrison's answer was delivered with casual brutality. Then you join the other families who failed their interviews. But Sophia was already moving, her artist's hands finding the ham radio controls with practiced precision. Before Torres could stop her, she'd switched frequencies and spoken clearly into the microphone. This is Sophia Santos. We're at Mrs. Patterson's house with Director Morrison and Agent Chen. They just confessed to murdering multiple families. Please send help. The response came immediately through the static. FBI backup units dispatched. Recording confirmed and transmitted to Oversight Committee. Morrison lunged for the radio, but Mrs. Patterson was faster, revealing a service weapon that spoke to her years investigating dangerous people. The real FBI, Director Morrison, not your compromised operation. Maria felt the power balance shift completely as sirens wailed in the distance. Morrison's careful conspiracy, built on years of patient manipulation, was collapsing around him. The confrontation was over, but the reckoning was just beginning. The sirens grew louder, but Director Morrison wasn't finished. His hand moved toward his jacket with practiced efficiency, and Maria saw the calculation in his eyes. If he was going down, he'd take them with him. Sophia, get behind the couch, Maria commanded, but her daughter was already moving. Artist's instincts recognizing the shift in Morrison's body language before anyone else. Mrs. Patterson kept her weapon trained on Morrison, but Torres and his tactical team were spreading out, using furniture for cover. The living room had become a standoff, with seconds ticking toward violence. That's when Maria made her choice. I'll do it, she said loudly, cutting through the tension. I'll work for you. Just let my daughter go. Sophia's head snapped up from behind the couch, eyes wide with betrayal. Mummy. No. Shut up, Sophia. Maria's voice carried a harshness that made everyone in the room freeze. I should have made this deal from the beginning instead of dragging you through all this. Morrison's hand paused. You're offering to cooperate? I'm offering to become your best asset. My forensic skills, my ability to move money without leaving traces, my experience staying off the grid, everything you said you wanted. Maria stepped away from Mrs. Patterson, hands visible, posture submissive. But my daughter walks away clean. New identity, full protection, never contacted again. Maria, what are you doing? Mrs. Patterson whispered. But Maria could see the older woman's eyes calculating, recognizing something in Maria's positioning. I'm being smart. Finally. Maria took another step toward Morrison, drawing his attention completely. Sophia's just a kid. She can't handle this kind of life. But I can. I've been running from dangerous men for years. Might as well get paid for it. Sophia's voice came from behind the couch, small and broken. You're leaving me? Like Daddy did? The accusation hit Maria like a physical blow, but she forced herself to stay in character. Your father left because he was weak. I'm leaving because I'm strong enough to make the hard choices. Morrison was listening intently now, and Maria could see him weighing the offer. A willing asset was always more valuable than a coerced one. Torres had lowered his weapon slightly, confusion replacing aggression. The girl knows too much, Chen interjected. She's compromised the operation just by being here. Kids forget things, Maria said quickly, especially traumatic things. Give her a normal life with a good family, and in 5 years, this will feel like a nightmare she's not sure really happened. Morrison nodded slowly. It's practical. The child represents complications, but you represent opportunity. Mrs. Patterson was backing toward her desk, weapon still drawn, but eyes flicking between Maria and the radio equipment. The sirens were getting closer, but not close enough. "There's one condition," Maria continued, her voice growing stronger. "I need to know my daughter is safe before I commit fully. Let me get her settled somewhere secure first. Then I'm yours." "Reasonable," Morrison agreed. "Torres, prepare transport for the child. We have contacts who specialize in relocations." That's when Maria saw Sophia's reflection in the window behind Morrison, not cowering behind the couch, but carefully positioning herself near the emergency exit Mrs. Patterson had shown them. Her daughter had understood the plan from the moment Maria started talking, because Sophia knew her mother well enough to recognize when she was buying time. "Actually," Maria said, her submissive posture shifting subtly, "there's something else you should know about my forensic skills." Morrison raised an eyebrow. "Such as?" "I'm very, very good at recognizing when financial operations are about to collapse." Maria's voice lost all trace of submission. "And yours just collapsed." Mrs. Patterson dove toward her radio as Maria threw herself sideways, clearing the line of fire just as the front door exploded inward. Real FBI agents flooded the room with professional precision, moving with the kind of coordination that spoke to careful planning rather than emergency response. But Morrison had one last card to play. As tactical officers surrounded him, he pulled his weapon and aimed directly at the spot where Sophia had been hiding, except she was no longer there. "Where is she?" he snarled, swinging the gun wildly. Maria's heart stopped as she realized the terrible truth. Sophia wasn't behind the couch or at the emergency exit. She was gone. In the chaos of the arrest, someone had taken her daughter. The victory tasted like ash, as Maria understood the real cost of their confrontation. Morrison might be captured, his conspiracy exposed, his operation destroyed, but Sophia had vanished into the same system that had been hunting them for months. Maria had won the battle but lost everything that mattered. The sacrifice had been made, just not the one she'd intended. Maria's scream cut through the tactical radio chatter and shouted commands as FBI agents secured the scene. She lunged toward the emergency exit, but Agent Rodriguez, one of the real federal agents, caught her arm. "Ma'am, you need to stay back while we process the scene." "My daughter!" Maria's voice cracked with desperation. "Someone took my daughter during the raid." Mrs. Patterson lowered her weapon, her face grave as she surveyed the room. Morrison was on his knees, zip-tied and bleeding from a split lip where he'd resisted arrest. Torres and the tactical team were being processed separately, their communications equipment confiscated. But none of that mattered if Sophia was gone. "Rodriguez," the lead agent called out, "we need a full perimeter search. 12-year-old girl, dark hair, approximately 5'2". Consider her a priority recovery." Maria felt her forensic mind fragmenting under the weight of terror. Everything she'd fought to protect, every careful plan to keep Sophia safe, had crumbled in the moment of victory. The irony was devastating. They'd exposed Morrison's conspiracy, but lost the only thing that made survival worthwhile. "Mrs. Santos," Rodriguez said gently, "I need you to focus. When did you last see Sophia?" "She was behind the couch, then moving toward the emergency exit like we planned." Maria's voice was mechanical, professional training taking over when emotion threatened to paralyze her. But when Morrison aimed at her hiding spot, she wasn't there anymore. Mrs. Patterson was checking her security monitors, cycling through different camera angles around her property. The perimeter cameras show movement during the first 30 seconds of the raid. 2 figures heading toward the tree line. "Sophia, and who else?" Maria demanded. "I can't tell from this angle. The resolution isn't clear enough." Morrison laughed from his position on the floor, the sound bitter and mocking. "You think this is over? You think capturing a few field operatives ends anything?" Maria spun toward him, fury replacing despair. "Where is my daughter?" "Your daughter is exactly where she needs to be," Morrison replied with malicious satisfaction, "safe from the consequences of your choices." The lead agent, introduced as Special Agent Williams, crouched beside Morrison. "Sir, you're already looking at conspiracy charges, domestic terrorism, and multiple counts of homicide. Kidnapping a minor won't improve your situation." "I didn't kidnap anyone," Morrison said smoothly. "I saved a child from a mother who chose to put her in danger by interfering with national security operations." Maria felt something cold settle in her chest. "What are you talking about?" "Your daughter isn't missing, Mrs. Santos. She's in protective custody. My people extracted her before the shooting started because someone had to think about her welfare." Williams exchanged glances with Rodriguez. "Protective custody through which agency?" Morrison's smile was genuinely unsettling, the kind that doesn't appear on official paperwork. Mrs. Patterson's radio crackled suddenly, and a young voice came through the static. "Mummy? Mummy, are you there?" Maria lunged for the radio, hands shaking as she grabbed the microphone. "Sophia? Sophia, where are you?" "I'm okay. I'm with Agent Parker. She's one of the good ones. She got me out when the shooting started." Relief flooded through Maria so intensely she nearly collapsed. "Are you hurt? Are you safe?" "I'm safe. Agent Parker says we're in a secure location about 10 minutes away. She's been watching Mrs. Patterson's house because they knew Morrison would make a move tonight." Williams was already coordinating with his team, triangulating the radio signal while maintaining the connection. "Sophia, this is Special Agent Williams with the FBI. Can you describe your location?" "It's like a command center in the back of a big van. Lots of computer equipment and radio stuff. Agent Parker says you guys have been working together, but she couldn't reveal herself until Morrison was neutralized." Maria sank into Mrs. Patterson's chair, the adrenaline crash hitting her like a physical force. The terror of losing Sophia, combined with the emotional whiplash of having her safe after all, left her feeling hollow and exhausted. "Agent Parker," Williams spoke into the radio, "this is Control. Confirm your status and location for extraction." A woman's voice responded. "Professional and calm, Control. This is Parker. Package is secure and unharmed. Location is Mobile Unit 7, Grid Reference Delta 4, ready for family reunion." Mrs. Patterson put a hand on Maria's shoulder. "It's over. Really over this time." But Maria was staring at Morrison, who had gone quiet during the radio exchange. His expression had shifted from malicious satisfaction to genuine confusion, and she recognized the look of someone whose carefully constructed narrative was falling apart. "You didn't know about Agent Parker," Maria realized. "Your extraction wasn't part of Morrison's plan at all." Morrison's silence was answer enough. Sophia was safe, the conspiracy was exposed, and the real authorities were finally in control. The immediate danger had passed, but as Maria looked around the room filled with federal agents and evidence bags, she understood that the aftermath of their ordeal was just beginning. Maria held Sophia so tightly that her daughter finally had to squirm free, laughing despite the tears on both their faces. They were standing in the parking lot of a federal building in Boston, 3 days after Morrison's arrest, and the September morning carried the first hint of autumn's bite. "I can breathe now, Mom," Sophia said, but she didn't step away completely, keeping one hand wrapped around Maria's arm as if afraid she might disappear. Agent Williams approached with a folder thick enough to suggest their ordeal had generated significant paperwork. "Mrs. Santos, we have the preliminary debriefing results. Morrison's operation was more extensive than we initially realized." Maria found herself listening with a strange detachment, as if Williams was discussing someone else's life. The conspiracy had touched 17 families over 8 years, using properties across 3 states as testing grounds for recruitment and security protocols. The cryptocurrency vault had contained evidence of foreign intelligence payments dating back to 2015. Morrison himself had been operating with minimal oversight for nearly a decade. "What happens to the money?" Sophia asked, with the practical curiosity of a 12-year-old. Williams smiled. "The cryptocurrency assets will be held as evidence during prosecution, then likely transferred to the Treasury. But there may be a substantial reward for civilian assistance in exposing the operation." "How substantial?" Maria's forensic instincts engaged automatically. even as part of her mind recoiled from caring about money after everything they'd endured. "Substantial enough that you won't need to worry about your daughter's college fund." Sophia squeezed Maria's arm. "Does that mean we can keep the house?" The question hit Maria unexpectedly hard. The Martha's Vineyard mansion represented everything: their desperate gamble for stability, the discovery that changed everything, the place where they'd nearly lost each other. The thought of returning there made her skin crawl, but Sophia's hopeful expression suggested her daughter saw it differently. "We can keep it if you want," Maria said carefully. "But I thought you might want to live somewhere without quite so many memories." "Bad memories, you mean?" Sophia considered this with the seriousness she brought to her art projects. "But also good ones. We figured out how to be brave together. We learned that we're stronger than scary people think we are." Mrs. Patterson, who had been standing quietly nearby, stepped forward. "If I may offer a perspective, running from places where difficult things happened means you never get to see them become places where healing happens." Maria looked between her daughter and the woman who had helped save their lives, recognizing a deeper conversation beneath the surface. For months, her every decision had been driven by fear. Fear of Marcus's creditors, fear of poverty, fear of Morrison's conspiracy. But Sophia was right. Somewhere in the midst of terror and desperation, they had discovered reserves of courage and resilience neither of them knew they possessed. "There's something else," Williams continued. "Morrison's defense team has approached the prosecutor about a plea agreement. They're claiming his operation was legitimate counterintelligence, authorized at levels above his pay grade." "Is that possible?" Maria asked. "Anything's possible in Washington. But the evidence suggests Morrison went rogue years ago. Either way, your testimony will be crucial to ensuring justice is served." Maria felt Sophia's hand tighten on her arm, and she realized her daughter was reading her expression with the same artistic perception that had helped them survive Morrison's psychological games. "You're afraid," Sophia said quietly. Yes, Maria had learned not to lie to her daughter about important things. "I'm afraid of testifying. I'm afraid of Morrison's connections trying to retaliate. I'm afraid of reporters and publicity and people knowing our business. But you're going to do it anyway." "Yes, because it's the right thing to do, even if it's scary." "Because it's the right thing to do, even if it's scary," Maria agreed. Sophia nodded with satisfaction. "That's different than before. Before, you did things because you were afraid. Now you're doing things even though you're afraid." The insight was so profound that Maria had to blink back fresh tears. Her daughter had articulated something she'd been struggling to understand about how they'd both changed. The old Maria, the one who'd bought the mansion out of desperate hope, had been driven by fear of failure, fear of not providing enough, fear of being judged as inadequate. The new Maria was still afraid, but fear no longer controlled her decisions. "I love you," Maria said simply. "I love you too." "Can we go see our house now?" Mrs. Patterson smiled. "I believe Agent Parker cleared it for return yesterday. All the surveillance equipment has been removed." As they walked toward Williams's vehicle, Sophia slipped her hand into Maria's with casual confidence. "Do you think it will feel different?" "Everything feels different now," Maria replied. "But that's not necessarily bad." "No," Sophia agreed, squeezing her mother's hand. "Different can be better, especially when you're different together." Maria realized her daughter was right about that too. They were going home, not to escape the world, but to figure out their place in it. The Martha's Vineyard mansion looked smaller somehow as they pulled into the circular driveway. Maria realized it was because she was seeing it clearly for the first time. Not through the desperate lens of financial salvation or the paranoid filter of constant surveillance, but simply as a house where she and Sophia would build whatever came next. Sophia pressed her face against the car window, studying the front entrance where federal agents had installed temporary security lights during their investigation. "It looks more normal now." "More normal how?" Maria asked. "Less like a fairy tale house where something magical might happen. More like just our house." Williams helped them carry their few belongings. Everything they owned still fit in 3 suitcases, a reminder of how quickly their old life had been dismantled. The federal government had provided temporary housing during the investigation, a sterile apartment in Boston that felt like living inside a witness protection handbook. Coming home felt strange and familiar simultaneously. The kitchen had been restored after the vault excavation, new floorboards covering the space where nearly $1 billion in cryptocurrency had waited in darkness. Sophia ran her fingers along the smooth wood, tracing patterns only she could see. "Do you think about it?" she asked. "All that money just sitting here while we were worried about groceries?" Maria considered the question seriously. The irony wasn't lost on her. They had lived for months directly above a fortune that could have solved every financial anxiety, while those same anxieties drove them toward increasingly desperate choices. But she was beginning to understand that desperation had also driven them toward each other in ways prosperity might not have. "I think about how we managed without it," Maria replied. "How we figured out what really mattered when everything else was falling apart." Sophia nodded and moved to the large windows overlooking the garden, where late afternoon sunlight filtered through leaves beginning their autumn transformation. "Mrs. Patterson says she's going to teach me about perennial flowers, the kind that come back every year, even when you think winter killed them." "That sounds like Mrs. Patterson," Maria smiled. Their elderly neighbor had become something between a surrogate grandmother and a conspirator, offering both practical help and philosophical wisdom with equal generosity. The thought of staying close to such a friendship felt like an unexpected gift. Maria's phone buzzed with a text from her new lawyer. Morrison's plea negotiations had stalled, meaning the trial would proceed as scheduled. Her testimony was still crucial, which meant months more of legal proceedings and media attention. The old Maria would have been terrified by such exposure, but the woman who had faced down armed operatives felt differently about courthouse cameras. "Agent Williams said there might be reporters," Sophia said, reading her mother's expression with artistic precision. "Probably. Does that bother you?" "A little, but also kind of not." Sophia was still looking out the window, but her focus had shifted to something internal. "I keep thinking about what you said to Morrison, about how I was stronger than he thought. Maybe it's okay if people know that." Maria felt something shift in her chest, a recognition that her daughter was processing their trauma in ways that might actually build strength rather than simply survive damage. It was a possibility she hadn't dared hope for during the darkest moments of their ordeal. They spent the evening unpacking, establishing routines that felt both new and familiar. Sophia claimed the art studio upstairs, immediately spreading her supplies across surfaces that had once hidden government surveillance equipment. Maria found herself in the study, looking through financial records that now seemed absurdly ordinary compared to encrypted cryptocurrency keys. As sunset painted the mansion's walls in warm gold, they sat together on the front porch swing that had somehow survived everything unchanged. Sophia was sketching in a new notebook, her pencil capturing the way shadows fell across their driveway. "What do you think Dad would say if he could see us now?" Sophia asked without looking up from her drawing. The question caught Maria off guard. They rarely talked about Marcus except in practical terms: court dates, custody arrangements that might never materialize, the financial debris he'd left behind. But Sophia deserved more than practical terms. "I think he'd be proud of how brave you became," Maria said finally, "and probably surprised that we learned to be okay without him." "Are we okay without him?" Maria watched her daughter's careful pencil strokes, the confidence with which she rendered light and shadow, the unconscious way she approached each drawing as a problem to be solved through patience and skill. Sophia had inherited Marcus's artistic talent, but developed her own remarkable resilience. "We're better than okay," Maria realized, the truth of it settling into her bones like warmth after cold. "We're who we were meant to become." Sophia smiled and leaned against her mother's shoulder, still drawing. Above them, the first stars appeared in a clear September sky, and Maria understood that they had finally found their way home, not to a place, but to themselves and to each other. The new beginning wasn't about leaving the past behind. It was about choosing what to carry forward.